What's going on, guys? Welcome to The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. We're going to have a conversation today about expectations and everything and anything that comes to mind when you think about expectations and kind of how they influence us in our everyday lives. So I hope you guys enjoy, and if you guys have any other questions or comments, please leave them at the end of the episode. So I was sitting at a dinner with Megan the other night, and we were kind of brainstorming topics and whatnot, and we were going to a new restaurant, and I'm going to say I had pretty high expectations going into the restaurant. So this is kind of how it all came together. I was going through the menu, saw some things that they always put the prettiest picture of something, kind of like when you go to a fast food restaurant, you see the picture of the new crispy chicken, and then you get the crispy chicken and it looks nothing like it.
Soggy chicken.
Exactly. And that's kind of how my whole experience was when I was at the restaurant. I had such high expectations, and then when I got my food and everything, it just changed the whole mood of the whole night, which kind of sucked because it was like you go to something, you have high expectations, and you're like, you just don't want to be disappointed. And it does kind of change your mood. I mean, it literally turned me from going from a 10 to thinking, oh, this is going to be the best night ever, to, man, this sucked. We should have just stayed home. I could have been watching the NBA playoffs right now.
Oh, man, that's the worst.
Have you guys ever had something like that, similar to it, with those type of expectations? Or,
I mean, definitely. I mean, if you think about it, expectations is everywhere when it comes to, like you said, food, movies, and entertainment in general. I mean, you have expectations when a new CD or album drops for a new singer or group that you like, or movies. I love movies, and I'm always looking at reviews and seeing how well it's scored, Rotten Tomatoes and Internet Movie Database. So expectations comes in a sense, it's life. I mean, there's always expectations with everything.
I agree. So you looking at Rotten Tomatoes, or you looking at these movie reviews, would that give you an expectation of what you are thinking the movie's going to be about? Is that going to affect what you think the movie is going to be about, or how it's been received? Because I just talked with Tyler today at work, and we were talking about that new King Arthur movie, and I said, oh, you listened to the Joe Rogan podcast with Guy Ritchie on it, and you really loved that, him talking about the movie, but then the second you saw the Rotten Tomatoes score of like 12%, you were like, oh, that movie sucks. I'm like, okay, wait a second. Maybe get some other views, or just go see it yourself with no expectations.
I think that's the craziest thing about expectations, is how they can totally control your point of view on a certain thing. So, I mean, with movies in general, I mean, that's probably the biggest one, and that's probably going to hit everybody closest to home, is when you go see a movie, you have your expectations by what other reviews. I mean, there's even people that go on to YouTube to hear someone else's reviews, so they have an expectation going into it. And then when they don't meet them, they have like skewed a idea of how the whole movie experience was to them. And it's weird how expectations can kind of control you and make you think completely different than you probably would have if you would have just went into it with nothing.
Definitely, it shapes your reality. It shapes the world in which we live. It can change the way you emotionally or physically feel about certain things.
I was reading an article today about expectations, and there was a case study where they took two classes, two identical teachers, two identical classes, and GPA range or whatever. And they took the teacher to the side and said to one teacher, oh, you got so lucky. You had these honor students. You should have a great time this year. Everybody's expected to do really well. And then they went to the other teacher, and complete opposite. They said, oh, man, you're not always going to get lucky. These students, you shouldn't expect too much out of them, because, just go easy on them. And then so at the end of the year, they did their testing, and it showed night and day the difference between the class that was told was going to be the high expectation class. Their scores were through the roof, just because of how the teacher treated those children, because she went into it with a little more care and probably took a little more time with them, expecting so much more out of them, as to the other class who had lower scores, which had nothing to do with their academic skills, because they were the same as the other class, but because of the expectations. People work up to what they're expected to work up to. I think that's a crazy thing to think about, is if you give somebody high expectations, they're going to want to work to get to that expectation level. And it was a weird case study. It made you think, imagine how your life would be different if your teacher thought you were one of the special kids.
Well, it just shows that what positive reinforcement can do, not only for if you're teaching a class, but what it can do for the teacher in that aspect. It's amazing what positive vibes can do to not only yourself but to others when you kind of shine that light out to people, and for that instance, negative.
Absolutely.
light.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if I'm going to meet Trevor for the first time and Noel over here is telling me, oh, dude, you know what? He's a little off when it comes to this sort of thing. I'm already going in with a skewed expectation of what our relationship is going to be. And I think that kind of works out to all facets of life.
And you even go into meeting me with this, all right, what's odd about him? You know, he said, oh, he's a little off. So you're going to be looking for the off tendencies that I'm going to, output.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's a huge issue in today. Like we've already spoke about social media and how it can affect our expectations of people, and it really does. But I think that's a huge problem in today's day and age. We don't go in to meeting someone or going in to see a movie or going to a restaurant like Noel did without having some kind of preconceived notion of what it's going to be about. So, but that also backfires too when you're really excited about having a dinner at a restaurant and you have no expectations, and then it just gets a two gigantic Roger Ebert thumbs down.
No, it's funny that you guys were talking about first impressions and stuff like that, because there was a same article. First impressions, they did a case study where they took a full auditorium of kids, and half of the group, they told the group that the speaker was a jerk, that he had a skewed view on things, and then they told the other group of students to just listen to what he had to say, didn't say anything about the guy. And just from that little bit of telling them a little bit about the guy just to what to look for, completely changed the reviews at the end of what they thought about the speech and everything like that. It's just weird because you start taking that into your personal relationships. Like you said, I mean, if it would have been your first time meeting Trevor, I could tell you Trevor that's a jerk and that you would never like this guy. And you'd go into it, anything he would say, if he'd be like, oh, I'm a Dodgers fan. And you'd be like, nope, this guy's a jerk. I don't ever want to talk to him again. I knew it going in.
Especially with me as a Giants fan. Yeah, no, Trevor, that's it. No more podcasts with you. We're done. No, I think there's a lot of negatives that can happen from expectations. I think there's more negatives than positives. I think the people, just our psyche, is meant to look for the worst in people, not really the best in people. And one of the things that really stuck out to me, I was reading an article on Forbes before we did this, and they were talking about that one of the biggest expectations people have in life is that life should be fair to them. That you think that everything should just go your way. Opportunities should come up for you. You shouldn't have to work for them. You just have this expectation of this false reality of things are just going to happen good for me no matter what I do. I don't have to put any work in. People should agree with me and things of that nature, which is not a good expectation to have, because that's just not the way life's going to work out. It's that candy-coated, this new generation of everything is going to go your way and you're going to do great, and that's your expectation.
To go off of that, saying that, oh, if you don't agree with me, I'm just going to block you out. It goes with the trophies for everybody at a young age. I mean, everybody's idea of, oh, we're all winners here. Then they go their whole life expecting that trophy. But when life sucker punches you in the gut, which it does to everybody, they don't know how to respond to that sucker punch. It's like, oh, I should be winning right now. Why am I getting treated so poorly? Why can I not get out of this? So I see Danny had a strong reaction to the trophy.
And I know we're definitely going to talk about competition in a future podcast, so I'm not going to get too deep into it, but that's one of the most frustrating things for me is the fact that you have this, no matter how hard you try or how little you try, you're still going to get a trophy at the end of the day.
Right, and it's false expectations. I mean, it's just like in work. I mean, you expect a certain thing. You think, oh, because I'm here 10 days out of the week or I show up every day that I'm going to expect it to move up the ladder just because I showed up. But that's not necessarily what it is. You got to earn what you want. And I think that's more of setting goals than setting expectations. I think this was something that we wanted to talk about also, is that you can't go into life with just expectations. You have to set goals, because goals are something you're trying to achieve. Expectations are just something that you think are going to happen just because it's going to happen, and that's just not reality. And I think that's you go on the internet and you can see those expectations versus reality memes that everybody throws online, and they're legit, because I mean that's how life is. You can't go into it with expectations thinking that things are going to go your way, because like you said, you're going to get sucker punched in the stomach, and it's not going to be fun when you try to fight your way out of it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. I know I say 100% agree a lot. My brother pointed that out to me when he was listening to our last podcast, but I can't not agree with that, because looking at reality and having expectations of it, it's always going to be through those rose-tinted glasses. You're going to think, oh, I'm going to get the job. Oh, I'm going to graduate college. Oh, I'm going to get a 4.0. And then life happens and you have to work and you have to, maybe go out and have a beer instead of studying. And next thing you know, your expectations are kind of going down the drain a little bit. And that's going to affect your brain and how you are going to view things. It does chemically as well as just mentally.
I mean, I think we're all in agreement that there's a bad side of expectations, but I mean, let's try to flip side and see the good side of expectations, using it to your advantage, maybe like a placebo effect. I was telling Danny earlier about the whole Korean War, how they didn't have morphine to give their soldiers and stuff, so they would do morphine shots or placebo morphine shots, and it would work. I mean, your brain, it's placebo's a real thing. Your brain tricks your body into thinking it's receiving something, and you take it for what it is. But take it a step further and use it into parenting. I don't know, Trevor, if this is something you've done, but I've seen people online say that they give their kids vitamins and call it sleeping pills when they can't go to sleep. And so these kids would go lay down, shut the lights off, and they'd be like, oh, I took this pill and I'm going to pass out. And it works, but it's that placebo effect, and that's that expectation of, oh, this should work, so I'm going to expect it to, and it works. So I don't know if that's something that you've ever thought of, Trev, or, you have kids. Have you ever used expectations to work out for you?
Well, I've never used a quote-unquote sleeping pill on my children, but that is a great idea, especially for my little one.
Put that in your notes.
Yeah. But as far as children, expectations are always high when you have kids. How could they not be? You want the world for your kids, which I'm sure our parents want the world for us as well. They want you to excel in this world, which is a really hard thing to do. So you have to lay out those expectations that, life isn't always going to be fair. Because if you go into it, graduating high school expecting everything to be sugar-coated and fair, then you're going to fail, or you're going to have a hard time starting out. Because like I said earlier, it's going to sucker punch you in the gut, and you're not going to know how to respond. So I try to lay out those expectations that, things aren't always going to go your way. Aaron's first year of basketball, they only lost like 1 or 2 times, and they got second place, and he was expecting to win it all. And then this last year, we only won 2 games. So the expectation of, oh, we're going to keep on winning, to all of a sudden, oh, we're not going to win a lot. The expectations went down completely for him, and it really affected him. So I'm curious to see how he responds this year to, if we win or lose, because expectations should definitely be a lot lower this year, because he's, in a sense, used to losing.
Yeah, I 100% agree, especially when it comes to sports and things like that. You look at any sport, any kind of competition, any kind of competing even for a job, if you want to get away from the sports analogy, I guarantee you not 100% of the people who have the expectation of winning will win, because talent is a thing. But I guarantee you 100% of the people who expected to lose lost. Guaranteed. Because if you go in expecting to lose, it affects how you are. It affects the way you perform. And I just piggybacking off of what you said, I can't imagine someone going in thinking they're going to lose and having that expectation of not standing on top of the podium and actually succeeding. I just don't think there's a connection.
Yeah, that's a real thing. I was thinking about it, and it goes into work too. You start hiring people, and you have high expectations at the start, but unless you use that positive high expectation kind of reinforcement to get them to that level, if you sit there and tell them, oh, this guy, his first day, he was a piece of shit, and you just continually go there and just let him slide and be like, oh, you know what, he wasn't worth it, or it's just the way he is, he's never going to get higher expectations because he's already expected to be that lower standard. So you have to force yourself to use positive expectations and say, oh, this person has so much potential. They used specific words when talking to certain employees, just because they knew if they did any negative reinforcement that it would cause them to just plummet. Just saying whatever they could to try to get them to feel better about themselves, and they came in with a better positive attitude, and it worked out in the work field. So I can only imagine it will work in sports and anything else.
Yeah, I'm sure that you probably get a lot of that being a general manager for a business like that's. You probably see a lot of that in your employees, and you can probably see the ups and downs during the day when their expectation of the day is higher. Oh, it's a weekend, man. We're going to be slammed at 3 p.m. We're going to be slammed at 6 p.m. for dinner. Man, this is going to suck. When people have that kind of expectation of already throwing in the towel, you know, that might be one crew, but the next crew the next night might be like, dude, we're gonna have fun tonight, we're gonna kill it, we're gonna make these customers happy, we're gonna have a great time. And I guarantee you one of those nights is gonna be better than the other night.
Oh yeah, it's night and day. I mean, I try to preach it all the time at work. Is you try to get the crew together and try to build that morale right off the bat. So, like you said, throughout the night is no matter what the night's going to be like, nobody has that expectation of tonight's going to suck. Yeah, you're going to hit speed bumps, but as long as you have those expectations that everything's going to run smooth because everybody's on the same page, it makes the night go so much better. And I mean, it's like that. It should be like that every day. And I think with raising kids and stuff like that, you got to set those expectations right off the bat because you start telling them that, oh man, life's going to hit you in the gut right off the bat. And they're going to be like, all right, well, anything I do is going to suck. And you don't want that expectation going into it.
As a parent, you know, I'm the only one speaking here that has kids. So the way I view life, I kind of, you know, I'm obviously pushing that on my children, but I have high expectations for them. So I'm going to set them up for those high standards. I'm going to try to build them up to meet those expectations. You know, positive reinforcement, we already mentioned, has such a huge role in meeting expectations that one negative day can affect a year. So to try not to, you know, destroy somebody on that one day is such a huge role for expectations. So we just got to, you know, positive reinforcement, like I mentioned, is so key to expectations and meeting them for that matter.
Yeah. And then I had a question for you since you're a parent. So our parents had expectations for us. You know, they had expectations, you know, we want you to go to college. We want you to finish in 4 years like they did when they were our age. Or, you know, maybe you're the first in a family to go to college and finish, and they have these expectations for you. Being a parent, has that changed at all now that you have children? Or is it more of like I want what's best for them, or do I want some sort of expectation that was already a cookie cutter from previous generations?
I definitely have, like I said, I have high expectations, but I definitely want my kids to go to college. I mean, it's proven that, you know, it's going to better you as long as you pick a good, you know, degree to go into, as opposed to like arts. I mean, you're not going to make a lot of money.
Shots fired.
That's going to be a great future podcast. I already have like writing that down for the topic.
But yes, I mean, with Aaron, he's already told me that he wants to be a scientist. My oldest, he said he wants to be a scientist. So there's already that expectation, you know, brought on by himself that, you know, he wants to go to college. He wants to be a scientist. He wants to go into that field, which is great. But I can't have those same expectations for my youngest because he's a completely different person. They already have completely different attitudes. So my expectations, obviously he's 3. I can't set, he's going to go to college. He's going to want to be a scientist. I have to adapt to who he is. So I think that's another aspect of expectations, not having the same expectations for every single person, because we're all different. We're all human. We're all imperfect. So it's just a play off of that.
Do you think you should set expectations for him though, and just set it in early that, hey, you should expect to be going to college, you should be doing this and that, instead of not giving him expectations to make me lower it to where he feels like he doesn't need to? Maybe, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
a fine line.
Yeah, it's like, how far do you go before you set too low of an expectations to where, so we'll take, like we're talking about, I mean, growing up, my sister and myself, my sister always had high expectations. She was always a 4.0 student, so they expected that out of her forever, going all the way into the end of high school. Her expectation was 4.0. She was a smart one. And then for me, it was, I was the class clown, or I was just, I just wanted to be hanging out with my friends. And I mean, I'm not saying that's the reason I grew up to be that way, but I just never had those expectations of, he's the 4.0 student, he's the smart one. I never had those high standards, so I never felt like I needed to achieve those high standards. And I mean, the more I read into this whole expectation things, I'm wondering, man, maybe if my parents were like, no, I mean, you're supposed to be this, you're supposed to be a 4.0 student, if that would have changed the way I grew up and changed the way I had those aspirations. But I'm sure my parents felt the same way, as though he's different than his sister, he's not going to grow up the same way. So I want to know where that line is and where you kind of have to lean towards, or maybe break away from not being scared of giving that second kid the expectations that you give for the first one.
That's the tough thing with expectations. I mean, how will it affect people? People react differently to positive, negative reinforcement. So I already have this high expectation for Aaron, and I hope that he meets it. I mean, that'd be terrible to hope that he didn't. And I'm definitely starting out going to hope that my youngest tries to exceed those expectations, because he is younger. He gets to see everything firsthand, the positive and negatives of life, with his older brother. So I'm going to have close to the same expectations and then, adjust along the way. I mean, it's all about changing course.
So kind of combining that with what Noel said earlier. So Noel, you were the second kid. So your sister was held to the high standard and you were kind of like, okay, well, I can be the class clown. So you said that. I was the opposite, and I was your sister in that example. I was the older kid who, if I got 100% on a test, it wasn't good enough. There was extra credit somewhere. God forbid I get a 97%, especially on like a Sunday school thing. Oh man, everyone else could get 70s and 60s, but if I got a 97, oh man, I heard about it on the way home because I missed a question. So I think that expectation of always constantly having to be perfect, and I'm sure we'll get into this on another podcast too, but that really made me kind of go the other way. Always having that constant, like, you got to have a 4.0. You've got to do, things 100% perfectly and correctly all the time. And then seeing that my younger siblings were not held to the same standards, it kind of made me have a little bit of resentment towards that sort of authority and that sort of expectations, to where maybe I would have gone and finished all of college if I didn't feel like I had to be perfect at it. And that still bleeds over into, my life today. Like, I will be writing things and I will go back and make edits before finishing it because it has to be perfect. So that was how that expectation affected me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that, because I guess I could see that through my sister too. She always felt like everything has to be perfect because you get a different. I think it's more of a personality thing than so much expectations at that point, because you got kind of built into the way you are now. Whereas to me, I was a little more emotionally free with myself when I was younger and everything. As long as I knew that I wasn't going to hurt anybody, I was happy, and that's all I kind of cared about. So going into it wasn't about academics and stuff like that. It was more about being social and stuff, like anything that had to do with that. And that's the way I was raised, but my expectations weren't high to get good grades. Whereas to you, it was all about getting good grades, getting that extra credit. And I could see where you kind of got a resentment from it, because I think my sister did too. As the older she got a resentment for it too. Not that I want to speak for her or anything, but I kind of seeing it from the back end. I mean, this is just my point of view, but she always did have those goals and expectations growing up, and she still has them to this day, kind of like you, always wanting to edit things and make sure that they're perfect. But it changes your personality as you get older. It's from expectations of having those standards when you're younger, kind of changes you when you're older.
I think it also gives you a propensity to maybe making mistakes and not feeling so bad about them either. Honestly, I'm not speaking for like your sister or any other people who are in like the same or who might relate to this story or anything, but I feel like it was almost kind of fun to screw up a little bit. And I think there's a propensity for like the people I'm describing, like myself or like that kind of person. It's kind of, I don't want to say fun, but it's kind of like, it's fun to push the envelope a little bit because you never were able to push the envelope because of those high expectations.
You think you ever went too far because of how structured everything was and how perfect you had to be, that you were just like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it big?
Well, it just, yeah, I absolutely think I did. There's a reason that like when I first moved out, I was like, okay, we're going to drink and we're going to party 3 times a night, because I didn't get to do that when I was studying or being homeschooled or whatever. It was a weird combination of just kind of how the expectations of having to be the perfect kid turned into like, okay, well, I can slack off now because I don't have to answer to anyone now.
See, I never had that. See, I never had the high expectations, so I never had that need for it. I just grew up just enjoying everything, but I also didn't get the high academics for it, so I don't know where the perfect line or balance would be, in which I'm interested, because, Trevor has 2 kids, and he gets to see both hand in hand. And where do you want to see your kids? Do you want Aaron to be the high academics and then Alex be the fun social kid, or do you want them to be hand in hand in both? Or
who am I to say what they are going to be?
You're not. Don't screw with your kids that way. You're not God.
Obviously Aaron will probably want to rebel like Danny over here. Who wouldn't want to stick it to the man when they're pressured so hard with these high expectations? Obviously you need to loosen those expectations as I'm not going to speak for anybody's parenting balance by any means, but you cannot be 100% go A all the time. There's got to be, like Danny just said, balance. It's so hard to, it's predicting the future for me right now.
Well, and to be fair, I don't think any of us are saying that somebody else put expectations on us. At some point in life, whether it's when you're younger or older, you put expectations on yourself. So it's not that Danny's parents were putting expectations on him or that you're going to put expectations on your kids. It's just they get to a point where they're going to start putting those same expectations on themselves because that's how they feel like you see them and want them to be, or their peers. It might not even be parenting. It might just be their peers that put the pressure on them. And that goes with the expectations when you're young. Excuse me. You get put into a certain social group, and the people that you're around dictate the way you grow up to be. I mean, it's just fact. That's just the way it is. Cliques are a thing, and that's just how you're going to grow up. But you would hope that your kids or yourself would put yourself in a better situation, but that's just not reality, unfortunately.
I mean, I definitely want both my kids to excel. I definitely, even if, let's just say, Alex is more of a slack off and a lazy kid and a goofball like you were, Noel.
Slack off, Noel.
Did I just get called a goofball and lazy and
slack off?
I'm
Wow.
not sure if I should be offended or...
I think the last two were more pointed towards you as opposed to the 5 things I listed, but there's still going to be an expectation of excelling in school. That's one thing that I will definitely hold high because I never really excelled in school. I definitely could have, but I was definitely lazy. And if I would have been pushed maybe a little bit more from my parents, I might have responded differently. But I was never really... I was pushed in the sense of, oh, you should want to do well, but that was really it. They just assumed that I would just grasp it myself, but...
And yeah, I think we were both in the same boat. I'm not to say that my parents didn't try. They tried. God, did they try. They, every day, where's your homework, this and that, but they didn't hold me to the same standard that they did my sister. And I think because their expectations weren't as high as they should have been for me, towards as they were for my sister. My sister, they had a little more focus on her because she was their oldest, and she did so well at the beginning that they just rode that the whole way. But for me, I mean, I was always the middle kid. I was the average, and especially in academics. But not to say that they didn't try, though. Like you're saying, I mean, their parents try as best they can, but if they don't set those high expectations, you're not going to exceed them because there's no point to. You have no reason to exceed your expectations because there's no reward for it. You're setting your own expectations, and you're going to meet those expectations. You're never going to exceed them.
And to go off of your earlier point of, the assembly of kids going with, oh, this man's a jerk, he's going to set bad views, or, oh, just listen to him, he'll have a good time. If I had a good teacher that I really enjoyed, I would try to excel for that person. Not only for them being a teacher because I liked them, but for myself because, I was having a good time and I set those high expectations. But if I had a teacher that wasn't into it, I would copy their persona, be like,
their demeanor.
If they're not into it, why should I be?
Well, and it also goes into, like we were talking about earlier, first impressions. I remember in school when you were younger, people would get classified as a certain thing, either a class clown, the smart kid, the athlete. And I think teachers play a big role in that, depending on how they teach that kid. There was a substitute that came in for a class, and the teacher left a note for the substitute saying, oh, let's just use Sandra as the helpful kid. Sandra's the helpful kid, so make sure that you get in touch with Sandra and make sure she's helping people. And Bob was the class clown, so keep an eye on him, make sure he doesn't do anything crazy. And for some reason, the substitute got the kids mixed up. And so when the regular teacher came back in, she noticed that Bob was being a lot more helpful and was going around the class helping kids, and Sandra was being a little more laid back and being the class clown. And she asked the substitute what happened, and I guess the substitute got the kids mixed up and went and treated them a little bit differently depending on how the notes said to treat them, and it made a difference. So it makes me think, like, if I wasn't considered the class clown growing up, how different my life would have been if I was treated by my teachers a different way, maybe a little more special, a little more treated with some like I was the special kid or the higher end kid, if I would have kind of took to school a little differently.
Yeah, that's like the butterfly effect of expectations. There's a million different ways it could have happened. If you had a different teacher in a certain subject, you might have wanted to major in something else and gone to college or done something crazy, become like a master's degree in history if you had a crazy good history teacher who got you super excited about it, or pegged you as his, assistant because you asked a really cool question about like the American Revolution or something. And it's the butterfly effect, man.
It's so nuts how little things like that could just influence you in a completely different way. I mean, we wouldn't be even sitting here right now if we had a different teacher in the 4th grade or the 5th grade. It's just nuts to think about that kind of thing and how expectations and everything can influence so much of you growing up and changing you into a completely different person.
Yeah, and speaking of influences, I think one of the biggest influences, at least in our day and age compared to in the past, is the presence of media. And I think one of the biggest things, segue here, one of the biggest things it affects is relationships. I think media, such as movies, TV shows, have affected relationships and the expectations of the other partner in a relationship in a way that we've never had in history.
Oh shit! Are we getting into expectations with relationships?
We got to drop a little bit, man. We would be we'd be remiss if we did not touch on relationships.
This is a tough one. I mean, you just look on Facebook and you already got, oh, I need a man that does this, this, and this, and so the expectations of
The
getting
Meghan
that man.
Trainor song, you know, everything that the guy has to do for her to be her man. And it's like, wow, that's every single romantic comedy and TV show in the last 30 years.
I don't, man, this is gonna. All right, let's get into it. All right, expectations.
We can do a little bit.
Let's do it. I would think that as a younger child, my expectations for what a relationship was supposed to be compared to what I think it is now were completely different. I grew up in the Boy Meets World era, and expectations of a relationship were Corey and Topanga, and
Craziest name ever, by the way, Topanga. Like, oh my goodness.
how dare you? You shut your mouth right
Is
now.
that blasphemous?
First crush.
Yes, I think that is many of our first crushes. But no, expectations for a relationship where you meet someone, you're with them for the rest of your life, and you grow old together, and that was it. There was no dark side to the relationships. They didn't exist. It was, I mean, you expected things to go the way they were, and when they didn't, I think it scared people. And I think that's kind of how, as you get older, you realize, man, maybe your expectations were a little skewed. Relationships aren't what they look like on TV.
I think the biggest thing too in that day and age, you know, like you're saying as a kid and seeing Boy Meets World and all that, I think the biggest difference between then and now is people now are expected to have zero flaws. I think back then you were allowed to have that expectation of, hey, he's going to fuck up every once in a while, but I'm still going to love him because that's part of him, or I'm going to love her because that's part of her. Now it's kind of a perfection that's being sought around online and in movies now. It's always this perfect sitcom, romantic comedy thing where the guy just does everything for the girl, and if it's from the guy's perspective, the girl does everything for the guy. There's no give and take anymore. And it's this expectation of what your perfect soulmate should be. And if it's bad, we'll check out.
Well, that's the beauty of relationships. I mean, you expect people to meet your expectations, and if they're at least somewhat close, I mean, 80%, you're like, oh, we're together forever, 'cause that's how life is. Well, not necessarily, but let me backtrack there. Life is not like that. But, you know, just to go off of Noel, when I was a child, you know, my expectations in a sense were like Leave It to Beaver, where,
Oh, yeah.
you know, the mom would stay home, you know, get the house ready, get dinner ready, and the man was out working all day, and then would come home and just, you know, interact with the kids and the wife and eat dinner, then, you know, get ready for the next day at work. So, but, you know, that definitely changed as I got older. You know, obviously I'm not, whatever you want to label that, you know, that mind
50s,
frame.
50s family. Yeah.
Yeah, that, you know, perfect family back in the 50s, but, you know, it's definitely changed, and my expectations have definitely changed. You know, women are so vital to society now that, you know, they have so many more opportunities now in the workplace that they, you know, some people say that they don't, but they really do. They're, you know, in my line of business, they're all the higher ups in my, you know, I'm in banking industry, and I'd say it's 95 to 5% women to men. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, there's a couple fields like that. Nursing's the same way. My brother, he's actually getting the good side of that because it's a lot easier to get a job as a male nurse than it is as a female nurse, at least from what he's being told as he's getting done with nursing school. And that's a very female dominated profession, as it always has been, though. So that's kind of the weird. That's kind of the mainstay. I don't think a lot of guys are as into being that nurturing person as a woman is, or is that just an expectation?
You trying to blow people's minds right now?
Just a little bit.
Yeah. No, I don't know. With the expectations in a relationship, I mean, I sit there and I think about it. In your own relationship, what do you expect out of your spouse or girlfriend or anything like that? I mean, for me, my expectations going in were, oh, Megan's just going to take care of me and I'm going to take care of her. But now it's like, that's not even close to reality. Is we're taking care of each other, and it doesn't work that way anymore. Growing, and even when we were first getting together, I mean, we had this expectation of, it's just going to be easy street. We're going to get jobs. We're going to grow old together. We're going to be in our rocking chairs in the porch, just living that lifestyle. And now we're 26 years old and we're sitting there like, we're going to be working for fucking ever. And our expectations were just long shots. They weren't even realistic. And I think we thought our relationship was going to be a lot easier too, and didn't realize how hard it was to make it work every single day. I mean, I'm not going to say our life is cookie cutter like we thought it was going to be. We have nights where we scream at each other and yell at each other, and I don't think anybody had those expectations that relationships were going to be as difficult as it actually is, and how amazing it really is when you see people that have been together for 50, 60 years and just see, man, how do they do it? I mean, do they set higher expectations and just kind of keep fighting to meet them, or are they setting goals and saying, hey, you know what, this is where we want to be and this is what we're going to do?
I think that's for our sanity. I think if growing up we thought it was going to be that hard, the human race would not be alive today, because no one would want to be involved with anyone else. You know what I mean? Like, you would only, if you were told that it was going to be really, really hard, you would be, oh man, I'm not doing that. I'm going to be single forever. Screw that. I'm just going to fool around and have fun. But you'll be on hover chairs, by the way, on your front hover porch.
Or hover porch. Okay. I wouldn't hate the idea. I mean,
It's a good idea. I might look into a patent or something. I don't know.
I'm just saying, if I'm 60 years old and that hover porch or hover chair is making a little too much noise, I'm going to start getting pissed off. So it's got to be very silent.
You're going to have the body of a 35-year-old. They'll reverse the aging process for you. So
Benjamin Button that shit?
Yes.
Okay.
Robot bodies.
Yeah. Oh, man. Wouldn't that be nice?
Look at these expectations we're having of the future, huh? They're all rosy. It's rose-tinted glasses, guys.
Yep.
We're all looking at a happy future.
God, man. I'll tell you what. After kind of doing research on expectations and all that stuff, I'll sit here and say I'm going to try to go into anything that I do going forward with as little expectations as possible. The downside of just not meeting expectations and getting disappointed is just so ridiculous. I mean, it puts you into a depression at some point, because you start not hitting expectations and start looking at things and being like, man, why isn't this going my way? It starts taking it out of you.
That's why people stay in a rut.
Yeah. I mean, and like you said, it goes with movies, it goes with dinner, it goes with relationships. It really starts taking a toll. I mean, shit, you can't even enjoy a movie anymore because you go into it thinking with such high expectations, and no matter how much they try, you're like, the CGI on that was subpar. Fuck this movie. I'm just 1 star. And it starts taking it out of you. You can't even enjoy anything. Like I was telling you last night, I watched X-Men Apocalypse. I went into it knowing nothing, didn't care. I didn't ask any of my friends about it, and I loved it. But I also sat there afterwards for an hour and was starting to compare it to others. And my expectations just took everything out of me again, and I hated it at the end. So, I mean, what do you guys think?
Well, we talked about movies at the start, and now we're back to movies again. You can tell what our full circle is. We went from X-Men Apocalypse, and we can talk about all kinds of movies. But that is true. If you watch a movie with no expectations, it's a lot better. So I may go see King Arthur, even though it got 12%, and not think about it and just have fun.
Yeah, if there's a movie, like my son really wanted to see the new Power Rangers movie when it came out. I did too, because I loved Power Rangers as a kid, so I didn't look up anything because I didn't want to spoil that for myself. So that you definitely have to go into, I think, the movie verse, going to without looking at any reviews, because they will skew your expectations. If you read a review and they say the CGI is terrible, the whole time you're watching that movie, you're going to be judging the CGI. So the expectations are definitely skewed by reviews.
I think it's fair to say that we're just going to go through life with as little expectations as possible when it comes to anything that you can review or try to enjoy.
And try to keep the good expectations for the rest of it. Always try to think the best of people.
Yeah.
I think that's a really big thing for the personal side of it. Always think the best.
Worst case scenario, placebo effect. If whatever you got to do, take that sleeping pill.
Stay off of Yelp.
Yeah,
exactly.
Have you guys ever had a situation where placebo effect, like somebody tells you, oh man, you're looking sick, you're looking a little pale, and then you start feeling a little sick and a little pale, even though you went into work with positive thoughts and like, oh no, today's going to be a good day. Have you ever seen that or felt it?
I can't say that I've ever had that happen with me, but I've definitely seen it happen to other people, and I 100% believe it, because the brain, your brain, if you tell your arm to start hurting and think about it hard enough, your arm's going to start aching, because your brain's connected to everything.
Well, I sit there and think about it at work all the time as everybody starts talking about like, oh man, everybody's getting the flu. It's flu season. And I'm like, how the hell is it flu season again? It was just flu season freaking 3 weeks ago. And you're telling me it's flu season? That's why everybody's calling in sick? Nah, I don't think so. Straight up placebo effect. I think that once somebody starts saying, oh man, I'm getting sick, stay away from me, you automatically wake up the next morning saying, oh man, that freaking Judy down the street was sick. I know I'm getting it. And then you start coughing and you start feeling sick. I just don't believe it. I haven't been sick for a long time. And I think it's because it's all in your head. I think a lot of it, I mean, I'm not going to say people don't get sick. That's just talking out of your ass.
It's a weird expectation.
Yeah, no. But I think placebo, I mean, that's probably the craziest expectation out of all of them, is that you can literally tell yourself that, oh, I'm going to get sick. And then boom, next morning you're sick. And I see it every day, and I think it's probably the scariest expectation out of all of them is the placebo effect. I think it's nuts. What your brain can do to your body is beyond me.
I honestly think that that's like the summary of it right there, is that expectations, they 100% affect your reality.
That's all for today's episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud or iTunes to get all updates on future content. And just remember, it's not important who's right or wrong, but it's always important to ask why.